Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey, Joe on Joe listeners, it's me, Joe Slepsky, and I'm back and you're back. This is the quarantine re-releases of our original tracks going back 4 years, and I hope you're enjoying these as much as I'm enjoying reliving them, warts and all. I think you can easily hear where I'm finding myself and finding what the show turned out to be, so I'm really happy to share these with you guys. Again, we pulled these back from behind the Patreon wall, and I wanted to make them available to everybody during this time to share and give and listen and have fun, especially because G.I. Joe's back on YouTube now. So, yeah, so I appreciate that. And you guys can always follow me at Joe on Joe Pod on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Let me know what you think of some of these early episodes, how terrible they are, or how funny they are, or how awful they are. And we're starting recording back up again, so reach out to me. Let me know, joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know if you want to join me for an episode. I believe we're going to jump into G.I. Joe Extreme very, very soon. So without any further ado, here is the OG track from Joe on Joe 4 years ago. Enjoy.
You are listening to the Joe on Joe podcast, the only podcast where Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Welcome to Joe on Joe. I'm your host, Joe Slepsky, and today we're going to be talking about the 8th episode of G.I. Joe, the 3rd episode of the Revenge of Cobra miniseries titled The Palace of Doom. The original air date on this was September 1984. And remember to follow us on social media, Joe on Joe Pod, and you can email me at joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Today's file card focus is going to be on Major Blood, the patch-eyed Australian guy with the silver helmet. A lot of bad guys are wearing silver helmets these days. So sit in, strap down, buckle down, and get ready for a really good episode, actually. Kind of a nice pick-me-up from the previous slowness of the last episode. And we're going to dig into the Palace of Doom.
Yo, Joe!
So, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is it's titled The Palace of Doom, 1984 release. It was also the same year that G.I. Joe and the Temple of Doom was released. So is there a connection there? Is someone ripping off somebody? Do I think that Lucas and Spielberg ripped off G.I. Joe? I don't think so. I have a feeling that G.I. Joe may have heard about the Temple of Doom being released. Now, this cartoon was released in September. Who knows how early they were making it. So you got to figure that they knew about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which, you know, we've seen before. They take cues from Star Wars and Indy and a bunch of other movies. So I kind of like it. I think it's fun. I think if you're a kid and you're excited about Temple of Doom, then you come into G.I. Joe. It's called the Palace of Doom. You kind of know what to expect. So here we go. We're getting into the episode. For a recap, for those of you just joining us, Cobra had gotten a MacGuffin device called the Weather Dominator. Now, the Weather Dominator does what you think it sounds like. It dominates the weather. You know, Destro could sit in it and command the weather, so they could send a hurricane here or a snowstorm there, etc. Well, G.I. Joe sent some energy, kind of a reverse energy blast back at the Weather Dominator, and it exploded. It's flying into 3 different parts, which were sent all over the world, to 3 far corners of the world. So this episode picks up with Shipwreck and Flint trapped in a snowstorm along with Mutt and Junkyard. And the big cliffhanger was that Mutt had gotten thrown off this skiff that they're on. And so now Flint has to travel out into the sand to try to rescue Mutt. A couple things on this. Shipwreck's using the grappling hook, which of course was part of the toy. He came with those little, I don't know what you'd call them, but it was like a rope with the 2 little like sailor hooks on them. So that's kind of cool. They're using that here in the first part. You know, and again, last episode was the first introduction of Shipwreck, so they use that again. The guys are using a shovel to kind of get traction in the sand, which is cool. But if you look close, they're all they're like swimming in the sand. Like the sand is up to their waist and they're moving in it. It makes for a cool look, but when you think about it, you're kind of like, could people really move? That's maybe that's how strong G.I. Joe is, that they can wade through it like water. So they rescue Mutt.
Sand lovers, we're free.
And Shipwreck calls them sand lovers instead of land lovers, which is adorable. So now we cut back to Cobra. We're gonna find out what's happening with them. And of course, they've got their they always got giant Cobra themed temples. You kind of think that some satellite would look for Cobra shaped buildings. And kind of maybe go, maybe we should investigate that giant temple. It looks like a cobra in the middle of the Andes Mountains. Maybe there's some guys down there. I don't know. Or maybe there's look on the satellite photo, there's a cobra temple in the middle of the, Colorado Rockies. Maybe there's some cobra guys down there. I don't know. So you've got Cobra sending out, was it Baroness and Zartan? They're going after the first part of the Weather Dominator, which is the ion correlator.
There she is.
They're going to
the island of no return.
You get to see the whale in action, one of our favorites, Torpedo. There's a giant whirlpool, like a whirlwind that's causing some weather problems. And remember, when the Weather Dominator exploded, there's crazy weather patterns all over the planet. So now it's a race to see who can get to the ion correlator first. And what's really fun about this sequence, you get to see all the toys in action. That's what really stood out for me in this moment where, that real quick. Also, you get a ton of parachutes. Everybody's got parachutes. This scene probably has more parachutes per capita than any scene G.I. Joe's ever shot. There's all kinds because there's a lot of helicopters getting shot down and everyone's got a parachute. But you get to see the toys being used specifically in the way that they were designed to be played with. So it's kind of like a little roadmap. So if you're a kid and you're playing with it, like they show you the killer whale, which is the hovercraft, and they show the 4 rockets firing out, and they show the depth charges getting launched off the side. The only thing missing is that sweet skiff that they would launch. Now here we go. Cobra Commander just sent Major Blood out on his mission, which is he's going after the Hydromaster.
Whoever recovers the pieces of the Dominator and reassembles them first will control
What
the
I like
fate
about
of
this
Earth.
episode,
It must
well, more than the
be
previous
us.
episode, is that it moves fast. There's a lot going on. They're like, hey, we got to go with this. Let's go here. We got to go with the Hydromaster. Go for it, Major Blood. They keep showing you the stakes. The whole world is
Planet's gone ape.
Cotton Picket Planet's gone ape, as Gungo says. And who put a camera on the Eskimos? I want to know that. Who put a camera on the Eskimos? So it moves fast. And while on the surface, they kind of, this whole miniseries is using the same template as the first miniseries. It's mixing up the pacing of it. So, yeah, we had a little slower episode in episode 2. But episode 3, this is like combining 3 different episodes of that first miniseries. So it's really smart. So kudos to the writing team on this, of knowing that we don't want to do exactly the same beats, or we're doing the same beats. We don't do it in the exact same rhythm.
I'd rather save yours.
Thanks. But we've got a world to save first.
Yo, Joe!
So that's our first intro to Shipwreck being a complete ladies' man, and random yellings of Yo Joe by Lady J in order to change the subject, the fact that she's into it. It's kind of like, that's almost, this Flint Lady J Shipwreck relationship right now is almost a little bit like Mr. Fantastic, the Invisible Woman, and Namor, with Shipwreck being Namor and Invisible Woman always being like, yeah, Reed, I love you, but that Namor sure is hunky. Can we team up with him some more? And that's what you're getting here. Like, Lady J's like, yeah, okay, Shipwreck, we'll fly together. And real quick, they put 2 people in the back seat of a Sky Striker? Okay, Roadblock. Kitty. Catching up on him. He's escaping the vines. He is now trapped in an episode of 24. Roadblock's getting attacked by bobcats, not unlike the daughter on 24. It's exciting, but kind of crazy. Kind of want Jack Bauer to come out and save him. And Roadblock makes his escape by jumping on top of a passing by 18-wheeler. Again, always 18-wheelers look like Optimus Prime in this world. And we're going to be introduced to a character named Hondaloo West, who is a spunky young lady in a cowboy hat. And I don't think she appeared anywhere after this miniseries. I really hope they made an action figure out of her in recent years. That would be hilarious.
Cobra truck, my hush puppies. These are my trucks, mister. Every one of them loaded and paid for by yours truly, Hondaloo West, president and manager of Wild West Holland.
And there she is.
Congratulations. You figured that out so fast, you must be a rocket scientist.
Roadblock is very observant.
All I got from you is a trucking commercial and a lot of sass.
He does use the word sass, which is exciting, and a word that's not used enough. Hondaloo, very reminiscent here of Candy Southern from the comic strip books. You remember Bongo the Balloon Bear and Candy Southern? I feel like they got a lot of that from this.
I don't care if you're with the Tooth Fairy. G.I. Joe?
Does the Tooth Fairy have a gang? Like, does she? Is the Tooth Fairy known for having a posse? And if so, if I'm Hondaloo and someone comes up to me and is like, "Hey, I'm with the Tooth Fairy," okay.
G.I. Joe will
Here we go to
return
break.
after these messages.
For this week's File Card Spotlight, we're going to focus on Major Blood. He's a mercenary for Cobra. His name is Sebastian Blood. So he apparently didn't feel the need to change it. He doesn't care if they know who he is. His primary military specialty is a terrorist. I don't feel like that's a specialty you can study when you're going through any military, but that's what it's listed as, so we're going to go for it. I'm not going to argue with the man. He looks quite dangerous. His secondary military specialty is weapons and tactics, which seems like that would be your first military specialty. And terrorist would simply be a job. Birthplace, he's from Sydney, Australia, and he's a grade 04. He's a major. Now, Blood received initial military training in the Australian Special Air Service. He later joined the French Foreign Legion. He worked as a military advisor in a number of countries and is currently wanted for crimes in Rhodesia and Libya. Proficient with every form of infantry weapon in current use, Blood has a tactical mind like a steel trap. He's a qualified expert for all NATO and Warsaw Pact small arms. Now, what you may not know about Major Blood, he writes poetry. Poorly. A mercenary's job is a heartless one. I'm a soldier for hire, like a pawnshop gun. My ruthless tactics keep you on your toes, 'cause I fight 'em all, whether friend or foes. Now, that's from the Attica Gazette. It's kind of like Major Blood apparently is a slam poet. Yeah. He had a big heyday early on. I think they thought he might, he was one of the early villains. And for whatever reason, he didn't really catch on. So I think when you bring in the other Australians, the Dreadnoks, then people don't need Major Blood anymore. And that he looked a little bit like Freddie Mercury, I don't think helped. And he looked a little bit like the bad guy from Commando, who also looked like Freddie Mercury, which I don't think helped either. By the early 80s, he was wanted for crimes in Rhodesia and Libya, adding a host of other international governments to that list over the next several years. It was during this time that he was hired by the international terrorist Cobra Commander to join his organization Cobra. However, Cobra Commander's true purpose for hiring Blood was kept hidden until the plan was to be enacted. Blood was to kill the arms dealer Destro, whom Cobra Commander feared was a threat to his rule. The attempt on Destro's life was unsuccessful, and after fleeing the scene and hijacking a bus, Blood was captured by the G.I. Joe task force and brought to their headquarters along with 2 other Cobra agents. During an attack on the Joe base by Cobra, Major Blood used the confusion to free himself from the shackles and with the aid of Scarface subsequently killed the Joe's leader, General Lawrence Flagg. I forgot about that. He killed General Flagg. Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, and that's there's a great cover in the teens issue of G.I. Joe with the bus being hijacked part. Yeah, this all come back. See, that's the thing. We're gonna get into eventually we'll get into digging out the old comics and kind of reading through them as well. But this is exciting. So here we go, Major Blood. Thanks for listening, and now back to the program.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
Back to the action. Over on the Island of No Return, we get the killer whale back in action, which
Use extreme caution in landing on the reef.
That coral is razor sharp and hard as steel.
That's Cutter. Cutter is awesome. He's the pilot of the killer whale. It was one of my favorite toys. And he apparently is a Kennedy. Some of the Joes crash. Ironically, not Cutter yet. And we get a lot of parachutes flying out of the planes because they're shooting down the planes. We see the Joe Wind Surfer, which was a mail-in toy. Like where you got the sail on a surfboard, surfboard boards, wind sail, windboarding, right? It's called windboarding. That's exciting. I don't know how they're keeping up with the motorized boats that the Joes are driving in, but they look great. It's like one dude on a windboard. It's kind of awesome.
Let's dig in and get a detail started for the island. Secure your positions pronto.
Here comes Firefly. Now, Firefly runs up and plants a bomb, which is going to apparently it blows a hole. It's a big enough bomb. It blows a hole in there. There's like a ring of land that's circling the main island of no return. Firefly just blew a hole through it. So now they're racing. So they're racing between Joes and Cobras. The boats are trying to get to this one entrance that they can get through to the island of no return, which is, of course, where the ion correlator is landed. There's some typhoons. There's some typhoons that are flying around and spinning all the ships together. And they're trying to survive it. They're kind of spinning in a circle. And now we're going to cut to
the scanner indicates
Major Blood,
the fragment
who
we
is
want
down
is inside
in,
that large
the South
structure
American jungle or something.
There.
And he is at the actual, what is called
The Palace of Doom. But I call it a simple military objective.
And I call it a LucasArts copyright infringement. Back to the island of no return. We've got some sky strikers flying overhead. Scratch that. We're not at the island of no return. We're still at the Palace of Doom. But the sky strikers just ejected a bunch of parachutes. So they can eject parachutes from sky strikers, and when you see like Flint and Lady J and Shipwrecker all there, and you know that they were all in the same sky striker, who's flying the sky strikers? Like, who's flying them home, man? How are those sky strikers getting home when everyone ejected out of it? And, you know, when you eject out of an airplane, the canopy flies off, right? And you're moving forward at a certain high rate of speed. I just want to know what's going on, because I've seen Top Gun enough that it's just not how airplanes work. So it's a little misleading. Come on, G.I. Joe. Like, really, WTF. So now we got the gang. Everyone's fighting. More parachutes. This episode is so many parachutes. They've sent those robots, which in the toys, the Cobra sent robots. Sorry, Cobra's robots are marching towards the temple in order to get the weather fragment. But they're calling them robots. I thought in the toy they were actually more of soldier, like Iron Man outfits. You know, like you would put a soldier inside, and then it would protect them as they marched forward. But we know that they use those same robots in the first miniseries. Snake Eyes fought them, and they definitely weren't people in there because they were just standing guard sentries. So apparently they robot. Now G.I. Joe counters with something called the Pack Rats, which were the mobile things. And now watch this. Okay, those Pack Rats just talk to each other like R2-D2. They blew up some robots. They turn to each other and they nod their heads like they're like, "Yeah, good job, buddy." That means they got sentient robots. Once again, Transformer technology. I'm telling you. The Transformers are buried in these G.I. Joe episodes if you look hard enough. Those Pack Rats are sentient robots. That's creepy. They should not be acknowledging that they did a good time. And there's another moment that's going to be coming up in this episode towards the end that has a similar thing happening. It just shouldn't be happening in the quote reality that G.I. Joe exists in. And we're going to go to commercial, and we'll be right back.
G.I. Joe will return after these messages. Now, back to G.I. Joe.
So we've got the whirlpool that's taking place in front of the island of no return.
The whirlpool's too strong for our engines. The ship's breaking up.
You hear Senator Joseph Kennedy there playing the role of Cutter. Now shipwreck torpedo. He goes underwater and he fires a couple torpedoes at the base of the whirlpool, and he's going to break up the whirlpool. So which works really great. I don't know if it's scientifically sound, but it sends the boats flying. And here we go. Finally, true to a Kennedy name, Cutter crashes the whale onto the beach. So finally, he's living up to his family name.
Torpedo, you got any more mean ideas?
Era. I mean, it's Mayor Quimby. It's fantastic.
And I will go to the island of no return.
So Spirit is going to make a run to the island. Remember, that's surrounded by like a moat. Spirit and Freedom, his eagle, are going to go hit the island and get that. Oh, there's the sea sled. We were just talking about this. Again, every aspect of the toy gets used. It's so smart.
Good luck, Spirit.
So Spirit and Freedom are going to go get that one piece. So they're making a jet to the island. Baroness sees what's happening, and she tells Zartan that he's got to, get a move on. Meanwhile, Zartan is underwater in some weirdo sub, ignoring everybody.
When it serves my purpose.
Because he's a mercenary.
Not before.
Back to the Palace of Doom. See, the show moves. Like, it cuts back and forth. It's real exciting. The music cues don't even change. Like, it's just like action, action, action. Gung-Ho, Shipwreck, Lady J are getting chased by a gigantic Aztec demon. Major Blood, with his really crazy, cool, awesome square armband, he sends this giant, sweet-looking robot. This blue and red Cobra robot, which is like 3 stories tall. And he's like, you go, Cobra Robot, get in there and stop those Joes. Now, I've never seen this robot before, but it's awesome. And this giant 3-story tall Aztec creature now is fighting the Cobra Robot. It's a kaiju fight. It's like, it's Pacific Rim. The 2 monsters going at each other. It's Godzilla. Like, let them fight. That's all that's missing here. With the 3 Joes at their feet making a break for the peace while they rumble around. And in the middle of like this weird temple, it's also got shades of Aliens versus Predator. I know we don't like to talk about that movie. It was kind of terrible. But that's kind of what was happening there. And that's a little bit what's going on here in this episode.
That presence feels you as well. Cobra!
Awesome. Did you hear the music change? Storm Shadow shows up. And it changes to like a Japanese, like kung fu like chime song. It's so great. And here we go with Storm Shadow and Spirit. This is the start of their rivalry, which in the cartoon they would have the rivalry. And it wasn't Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. Probably again because Snake Eyes doesn't talk, so it's harder for them to give you that. But it leads to one of the better. One of the better episodes once the regular series starts, but this is where it starts on the island of no return. So we got the Cobra robot fighting the Aztec robot, and just there, right there, there's no sound for it, but the temple started to collapse because there's all the fighting is causing like an earthquake, right? So these 2 robots are fighting each other. When the temple started shaking, those robots stopped fighting, looked at the ceiling, and kind of were like, "Oh, there's trouble." Again. Sentient robots in the G.I. Joe world. If they were just robots with like one mission of, fight this guy, fight that guy, they wouldn't stop and go, "Oh, wow, hey, look, the palace seems to be collapsing around us." They would just keep fighting in it, which again tells me there's something weird going on with the Transformers. So Gung-Ho and Shipwreck and Lady J are running away, and there's a chasm opening up because of this earthquake. So the guys jump over, and they make the jump because they got there first. And Lady J is about to get steamrolled by the 2 kaiju fighting. And she does a pole vault, leaps across this huge chasm that's now way too large for anyone to jump over. And Gung-Ho and Shipwreck catch her, save her. They've got the piece of the Weather Dominator, or do they? Because it falls into the pit, and Major Blood steals it from them. And now they're stranded on a piece of land that's been isolated from the earthquake. And Flint and a random Joe, they put out this crazy-looking ladder, which looks like a couple of Dr. Octopus tentacles, which automatically makes a ladder for them to crawl over. Apparently, well, they hadn't invented the bridge layer toy yet. And it makes for great, something great for them to hang on to when these two kaiju, which the Cobra robot just beat the Aztec robot. And so now the ladder swings down. Lady J can save herself, but Shipwreck and Gung Ho cannot. And that's our cliffhanger. And they're falling to their doom down a chasm.
After these messages. In our next episode of G.I. Joe, Spirit and Storm Shadow continue their fight over the Weather Dominator.
And it's awesome kung fu
and
action.
Hondo Lou kidnap the Cobra Commander in his own temple.
And that's awesome Honda Lou action.
Dangerous plan of treachery.
And that's awesome Zartan action.
And G.I. Joe and Cobra.
And we get
for the recovery of
ice skating G.I. Joe playing hockey with Cobra over the final piece of the Weather Dominator. I cannot wait for it. It's going to be so good. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a fan, following me. Hey, give me a rating on iTunes. It always helps. The more ratings, the more we get listed and the more people hear about us. Any questions, let me know. joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Tell your Joe-loving friends. And most of all, now you Joe. And Joeing's half the battle.